Good morning and good afternoon, rather, everyone. Welcome to the final event of the Nolumbeka Project's series called RiverStories 2020. We originally planned on having a series of events going from the headwaters of the Connecticut River on down through to the mouth of the river. We would have traversed the homelands of the Abenaki, the central Connecticut River Valley of the Nipmuc, past Poquonic and down to the lands of my tribe, the Nahantic Indians, at the mouth of the river. The final event would have been in October at the Connecticut River Museum in Essex. However, that was not to be, as you all know. So many of our events were either postponed or went to Zoom, as this event, which was intended to be on the riverbank in October at the it would have been on the riverbank in Springfield with a large public gathering. This is not possible. So we are joining you from all different kinds of places. We always begin with acknowledging that we are standing on and benefiting from indigenous lands in this Connecticut River Valley. These lands were taken, stolen, expropriated, oftentimes by violent means from the indigenous peoples. This is still the homelands of the Pocumtuck Indians and their descendants. We acknowledge the Pocumtuck, the Norwottuck, the Nonotuck, the Waranoco, the Agawam, whose homelands this is and whose descendants are still here. The Abenaki and the Nipmuc and all of us benefit from this land and are very proud to be from this place. We also always express our gratitude to the sun, to the four winds and the four directions. We express our gratitude to the hills, the plains, and the rivers that have sustained us over so long a time. We express our gratitude to our ancestors who have guided us and who are here with us today. We give thanks for all good things. We also give thanks to groups that have donated funds to help support this series and to support all of us over time. Primarily for this particular event, we need to acknowledge and thank the Babson 2020 Fund of the Peace Foundation, Peace Development Fund, and in particular, Jamie Babson, who has been a staunch supporter of ours for the last 20 years at least. The Holyoke and Springfield local cultural councils were also prime supporters in this effort, and two of our presenters, Larry Spotted Crow and Andre Strong BearHeart, are residents of Springfield. Also in this list is Northeast Solar, the River Valley Co-op, who has done a stalwart job recently in a controversial subject here in Northampton, the National Vinyl and the CNS Grocers. I personally, and I think we all owe a great deal of thanks to Kate Albrecht, who went through some very challenging times going from a large public gathering to a online Zoom virtual presentation. She was really assisted with our Jennifer Lee, who is a great longtime supporter and activist in the area. Our events coordinator, Diane Dix, did her part, and we really need to thank our engineer, Lisa McLaughlin, who is behind the scenes working on keeping all of this going. So that is really what I needed to say. I did mention the fact that we were anticipating a long series of events every month, starting at in cooperation with Dartmouth College and going all the way down the river, from there to Brattleboro in the El New Abenaki territories to the Great Falls, Peskiomskat, on down through Amherst, the Hitchcock Center, and then to Springfield, and finally to Essex. So many of those have been postponed, and we hope that you will join us in 2021 when we can bring these back to you. So I'm going to introduce our next musician, our next presenter, who is Mixashawn, who's coming to us from his home outside of Poquonnock, Connecticut.
Hello.
Mixashawn is a grandfather and internationally acclaimed jazz artist, educator, and maritime arts practitioner. Simply put, a wave artist. Mixashawn has been present at our Pocumtuck Homelands Festival, the first weekend in August, for a number of times, and he's always gotten everybody up, rocking, jumping, and dancing along the banks of the river. He is of Makikanu, Mohawk, and Cherokee descent, and from the community known as Windsor or River Indians of Windsor, Connecticut, at Poquonnock, village by the water. He'll take us now on a trip through American music from pre-colonial to the present in a non-linear manner. And if you are further interested in Mixashawn's work, you can go to mixashawn.com, www.mixashawn.com. So please be sure to check out his music, and you're going to have a sampling of his work right now, if Mixashawn is ready.
Hello, everyone. I'm not going to speak too much. I'm just going to play, but I'm going to start out with a circle of sound. Halle, halle, halle. Well, now I'm going to play a song that came to me a number of years ago. It's called My Dreamer. And we try to listen to our dreams. I try as best I can. So this one is My Dreamer. about it. I'm going to change it up. I'm going to do something traditional. I'm going to do a traditional song taught to me by Moonface Bear, and it's called Cantantoit, in about the Creator, how we refer to the Creator in Algonquin down here in Connecticut. And the words mean, may you be filled with strength from the Creator. Cantantoit, cantantoit. Cantantoit, cantantoit. Besmejamiwa, 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 besmejamiwa. You take a tabone, you take a tabone. You take a tabone, you take a tabone, way Now, since I did a little bit of traditional music, I'm going to go on the 20th century, actually the 19th century, 20th and now 21st century traditional instrument. And I'm going to play some of the Native American art form, also known as J-A-Z-Z, because as an indigenous person, I'm very proud to be a practitioner of the indigenous art form of this great land that we live in. So I'm going to play a song, a rendition of the American Indian Movement song. Well, now I'm going to do a little something from the hometown of Engine Joe and Uncle Tom and Engine Joe. And I'm playing this song because the world in which we live, there's been a lot of history that's going on between indigenous people and Black people, and of course, the European people who have been here. But this one's going to focus on the hometown of Uncle Tom and Engine Joe in the backyard of Clemens and Stowe. Decode the equation. It's historical, though. Uncle Tom said, Engine Joe, meet me at the wigwam, bar and grill, on a solemn hill. Let's get ill. Sowing seeds of aggression, repressing thoughts, cold-blooded motivator, repressing thoughts, hard-working mamacita, repressing thoughts of aggression. Now I think I have a few minutes left. Do I have a few minutes left? Oh, okay, good. Could everybody hear everything? Good. Now I'm going to do a song that I wrote a while ago, many years ago, because I'm many years old. So this song is the beginning of a piece of music I composed for, I guess you call it an opera, and it's called An American Songbook. And when I talk about American, I'm talking about, as I said, or as I was introduced earlier, from indigenous to the current. Hope you like this one. It is a song to behold, lingers in my soul, whispering throughout the trees, in my mind, free. Hey. Now I'm going to do another original I wrote, and I wrote it a number of years ago, and it has to do with climate change, although that down here we don't call it climate change. We just say frigio because it's cold like that. So this is a song about what's going on right now. I can feel those cool waves remind me. Cold over Mississippi, also known as Minnesota, on the edge of the Arctic Circle, planetary axis shift. In this time of great floods, oh yeah, the water is rising, and the sky is falling, raining, snowing, blowing down everything under the great earth ocean, gravity, and so few trees to slow the rising waves. Frigid wave action fed by the hole in the ozone. By air-conditioned minds punching rocket power holes through the atmosphere, really believing they can live in outer space without the Earth. Or whatever science fiction you dream about. You hear what I'm saying? Now dig what I mean. As the polar caps, north and south, begin to melt, break up and move. Oh yeah, the water is rising. But did you know that frigid air masses high in the atmosphere, stratosphere, ionosphere, frozen since the last ice age, have already been unleashed upon us. So you better get a grip on the inner atmosphere, because frigio is the current wave and we have nothing to fear, you dig. So wig or wig not, in case you all forgot about poverty in the Arctic Circle, because it's cold like that. Now, you want to hear one more song? Do I have time? Because I don't know what the time is, so we good? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, one more song? Yes, no? Okay, on to the next one. Got you. Right on. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time around. Peace.
Another song would be great.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
My sign language is bad, sorry.
No, because the screen's killing. No problem.
Thanks,
okay, now I'm going to do one. This is one of my mother's favorite songs. And it's It's an old standard. Hope you like it. Just you and I, forever and a day. Love will not die, we'll keep it that way. Out among the stars we'll find the harmony of love to love into. East of the sun and west of the moon. Thank you very much. All right. Right on. So I'm good now, or
Yes.
we good? All right. Thank you. See you next time around, hopefully.
Wow, that was something else, and it's going to be a tough to follow. We have another 3 presenters, so good luck with that, everybody who's coming along next. What just an eclectic musical genius we just were able to witness. It's such a small sampling, but I think that in the future, the next time Mixashawn is down at the Pocumtuck Homelands Festival the first weekend in August, I'm going to not jump and dance around, but I'm going to listen a little closer. It's pretty hard to sit still when he gets going, though, with his other accompanists. Super. Thank you. Thank you, Mixashawn.
Thank you.
So our next person is Rhonda Anderson. Rhonda is a very busy woman these days. She's holding down many, many different positions. She is a Nipmuc Athabascan from Alaska. Her native enrollment village is Kaktovik. But I think most importantly, I know most importantly, because she told me, she is a mother. So that's job enough for anyone, but not only is Rhonda involved with her family, but she's recently been named the Western Massachusetts Commissioner on Indian Affairs. which is no small task given all of the pretty good things that are happening around here, but there's a lot of monitoring and logistics to be taken care of. So Rhonda has been really busy these days, and that was only just one little tiny thing that she does. She is a classically trained herbalist and silversmith and activist. Her activism ranges from the removal of mascots, which is a big deal in Massachusetts right now, obviously. And she has been working on the state flag and seal issues. She's a water protector, having spent a lot of time out at Standing Rock. And most importantly, nearby to her is protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from the extractive industry, and we all know about that. Rhonda also developed a fantastic photography exhibit called A Vital, Vibrant, and Visible: Indigenous Identity Through Portraiture. It's an ongoing collection exhibit of portraits of Native people of New England, curated by Rhonda, and really to bring awareness to contemporary Indigenous identity. As we all know, through our work in Nolumbeka Project and in other groups, people are actually not aware that Native Americans have persisted. Part of our effort this year was through our Indigenous Voices programs to bring that to mind. But I personally have seen this photography exhibit, and it was at one point at the Discovery Center in near the Great Falls. Fantastic. Other aspect, per dimension of what Rhonda is capable of. She is a founding member, along with Larry Spotted Crow, of the Okateo Council, which is a very, very important center for Indigenous youth and Nipmuc tribal youth, as well as the ongoing part of the ongoing effort to preserve Nipmuc culture. She is a member of the Native Youth Empowerment Foundation, and as well as the occasional representative of the Native movement. Lots going on. Rhonda's a very busy woman, and she's also beaming in from the foothills of the Berkshires, and we hope that her internet connection is going to hold up. And if it becomes problematic, please bear with us, and we will pick up where Rhonda is obliged to leave off. So I'll turn it over to Rhonda if she's there, and enjoy yourselves. Bye now.
Thank you so much. That was very beautiful, David. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Pagalagisi, Uwalalutak, Fairbanks ni Anaya Nuranga, Pangmakpak Anuranga, Koenami, Anupiak Shinega Alak, Tanak Shinega Rhonda Anderson, Savaktunga Commissioner to Indian Affairs me. So good morning and welcome to We Are the Story, We Are the Land. Kuyana to Nolumbeka for hosting this event. I am, as David said, speaking to you from traditional homelands of Sokoke, Abenaki, and the Pakumtuk. I live on the Pecamagon River, which is known as the Green River today. And I choose to call this beautiful place in Western Massachusetts my home. I hope that I'm coming through okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Thank you. I have sequestered all devices. I have shut down all internet coming into my home except for this. So hopefully it's working. My cat wants to come and visit, and you know what happens if we don't allow cats. All week, I have been thinking about which story to tell you. I have a lot of stories to share, but at least two of them are really important. And I decided late last night to tell you both of them. So let me tell you first about who I am and my family. And I don't get to share that often. So let me screen share my screen so you can see what I see. It's going to take a second here to get that going. Let's see. Okay. Okay, can you see what I see now? I hope you can. Okay, good, excellent. Technology and all its glory. And so I am on Nipmuc Athabaskan of Alaska, which is up here on the very top of Alaska. It's a whaling village in Area 1002 of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, right on the Beaufort Sea. My family depends on whaling, hunting, and fishing for food. And twice a year, there are more polar bears in Kaktovik, I swear, than humans. And right now is one of those times. We don't have reservations, rancherias, or reserves, but we have our traditional villages that we enroll in since time immemorial. We weren't forced to move like many of the other tribal nations in the United States. This is a picture of my grandmother. She's the little one sitting in her sister's lap. They grew up in a clapboard house, no igloo. 22 people lived in this 2-room house. And my grandmother only made it to 2nd grade at residential school. However, she did go on to nursing school. Over here on the top right is a picture of my great-grandmother Egyak and her sister Alak, which is my namesake. On the bottom left is my grandpa Johnny. He went to a Klutna residential school, which is an Indian school, you know, a place where culture and language are removed. But he left at the age of 16 to become a commercial pilot. My dad and I were both born in Fairbanks, and he grew up in Fairbanks living a life that you might recognize in mainstream America today, you know, baseball team, he went to college, I was a dorm baby. Part of sharing this is so that you can see what I see through the eyes of an Indigenous person growing up here in Massachusetts, because I did grow up here in Massachusetts. And what I want you to see is this colonizer lens in education that taught us the myths of the Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving. When the Maine's Passamaquoddy tribe first met French fishermen in 1586. And because of that meeting, French typhoid ripped through the tribe. And that was followed by an infection of smallpox in 1616, also introduced by French sailors. And this caused nearly 90% of the indigenous population up and down the seacoast of New England to perish. So upholding the Plymouth Rock is this kind of dominant lens on history, creating a more comfortable history, and also doing a great job of erasing Native voices and our own history of thousands of years. It is my hope that in this 400-year anniversary of Plymouth and Patuxent, we can finally hear Indigenous stories and begin some kind of truth and reconciliation process. Our area, as you know, is full of plaques commemorating colonizers, referencing natives as Indians, savages, or the attackers. And the term Indians just erases the identity of and lumps 567 very different cultures and even races of indigenous people into one term, Indians. It's a painful to remember. Even when the plaque is kind and it's recognizing indigenous tribes and important places, they still can be wrong. On the Mohawk Trail, as the highway was named by Clifton Q. Richmond in 1913, greatly exaggerating claims that this was Mohawk traditional territory. We can see today those cultural appropriations and stereotypical caricature representations. Nothing exists, giving a nod to manifest destiny and westward expansion. On this Mohawk Trail, I cannot think of a more culturally appropriated cluster of misinformation that fully participates in erasure. And it is regarded today as factual and is highlighted on every scenic signpost, the hail to the sunrise. The fountain and the statue were installed by the improved order of the Red Men. It was a group that only accepted white people and then gave them Indian names, and they belonged to clubs or orders called by tribal names. So the names on the fountain are not actual tribal native nations in support of the fountain. And as you see on the bottom, the recommendation, the prevailing attitude is cemented, to coin a phrase, that we are gone, as this review noted, that we are wiped off the continent. This kind of education and erasure begins early in schools with what is institutional racism. This is what was being taught to my child, our children, in the year 2012. These books that she was reading in class are nonfiction. Now, please understand that third graders don't have the resources to use subjectivity to determine the difference between what is fiction and nonfiction. But what they were learning in this book, The Courage of Sarah Noble, is that Indians eat human meat off the bone. They would just as soon skin you alive. The native people were likened to little brown mice. The vocabulary words heathen, squaw, savage, Indian, moccasin, they came home in a vocabulary test. And as you can see on this, Indians are savages. That was a sample sentence given to my daughter when she asked for the definition of savage. Indians are savages. Her test was, she was needed to correct Indians, and when she was done, it was marked very well done. The damage of this was long-standing, very hurtful, and very painful. We actually had my daughter's friends sitting at our dinner table saying that my daughter was not native because she wasn't a heathen savage and that she didn't eat human meat off the bone. It's also pretty important to recognize the book Education of Little Tree by Forrest Carter. That was actually Asa Carter, who was a KKK leader and segregationist speechwriter, not a Cherokee elder, as this book was taught as a nonfiction biography. So that kind of education and stereotyping and biases in elementary school are further cemented in institutional racism with mascots and team names in high schools. Thankfully, Turner's Falls High School changed their name in 2016, and Mohawk made a partial change in 2019. I went to both high schools, so I am alum of both of these high schools. The use of these mascots kind of greenlights more widespread community stereotyping, making it acceptable to do, as evidenced by our local newspaper headlines. Indians invade, in town braces for Indian attack, and cultural appropriation by wearing stereotypical headdresses. As Larry has often said, and I say, we are the last accepted vestige of overt racism in this country. And I would go so far as to say even celebrated racism. and celebrated cultural appropriation. As you can see in these pictures, we are viewed as ignorant drunks, savage warriors, and sexualized Pocahontas. This kind of representation leads to what most people think versus the truth. This romanticized Pocahontas princess versus the real struggles and violence we face as indigenous people, upholding our tribal sovereignties and our indigenous rights. This is really important to understand because we have the highest rates of murdered and missing indigenous women. Our teenagers have the highest assault. Our men have the highest rates of incarceration and death from police brutality, and yet we make up less than 2% of the population in the United States. So what we are taught, what we see, those myths and stereotypes create biases that dramatically affect our outcomes. I have this picture because this young Dakota woman, a teenager, committed suicide months after this picture was taken. It can be hard to visualize a future with yourself in it when you're facing such erasure and violence. So in an effort to provide healthy and accurate representation, Linda McInerney from Egg Tooth Productions graciously gave Sarah K. Lyons and I space to create an ongoing portrait series titled Vital, Vibrant, and Visible, as David had spoken about early in the introduction. Thank you. This project was done to give Indigenous people from here or living in this area the platform to determine how we would be represented. I wanted you to see our diversity, our students, our leaders, our community. I wanted you to see families with children, lawyers, professors, doctors. These kinds of representations of Native people are invisible in mainstream society. We have a lot of work to do, and I thank you for being allies and accomplices and recognizing and making these changes. So now I'm gonna switch it up to you, and I'm gonna tell you a different story, because of course this is a story of rivers, right? Like we are all connected to each other by the largest watershed in New England, the Quinnipiac, which flows from the Canadian border to Long Island Sound, makes up 11,000 miles of watershed. The map of the Quinnipiac watershed is on the right, looking like a beautiful tree of life. And I love places since time immemorial from Lisa Brooks. There's no borders. And the red lines are paths of travel by foot or by Mashoon canoe, following the rivers and confluences, places that are important for like the fertility for gardening, harvesting foods and medicines, fishing, places of gathering, reconnecting and uniting. There is an interconnectedness and fluidity as this river is constantly moving. It's always shifting, and it's considered a living being. As you know, I live on the Pecomagong River, which is also known as the Green River. And one morning, I had one of these most visceral dreams. I was standing on the banks on the ground, and it had this circle on it. I was so curious about this stone. And I bent down to pick it up, and my alarm went off. So that morning, I decided to stop by the river to skip some stones and think about my dream. And as I walked up, right away, I saw this rock from my dream, the circle right on it. I decided this was a sign. I wanted to know the origins of this river and why it was glacial, silty green that day. And so I got in the car and I followed it. And I was totally blown away by what I found. I came across an ancient exposed glacial perch lake of about 5 acres in size. And all of this glacial silt from tens of thousands of years ago, which is tumbling into the river. I just wanted to go and explore so badly, but all of these trees were literally falling in as I was standing there. So I continued to follow the river to the headwaters, the source of which was at the foot of Hogback Mountain in Marlborough, Vermont. I was so surprised and elated. Like, how could I have lived on this river for so long and not known its origins? So now when I hear the water and I hear it bubbling, I can hear the story of where it's from, the places it's traveled, from springs to bogs, over waterfalls and meandering through meadows, carving ancient glacial lakes, lifting that silt from over 10,000 years ago, and knowing that it's set free and it's seen and it's been acknowledged. I now have a better understanding and connection to this river. So I ask you, what is your watershed address? Get to know your watershed. Get to know the challenges that your watershed faces. When BearHeart Industries leaked sulfuric acid into the North River last September, killing thousands, 10,000 fish and wildlife depending on that river, I organized a prayer and a community awareness rally. And we helped the elementary school raise trout in the classroom. They were then released into the river this summer. The children learned so much about their beloved river. And I have always tried to be participating in a kind of reciprocity with my watershed, giving back to the watershed. 7 years ago, I did something very similar. I was a Girl Scout leader, and I helped the troops study how to save water, how to be involved in their watershed. And they learned what lived in the river by the school, and they stocked salmon fry. It was one of the last years that salmon fry were stocked. When I fish and forage for a spring meal of trout, fiddleheads, and ramps, I make sure that I participate in reciprocal relationships for transplanting ramps in an area that is soon to be disturbed for building lots. I harvest stocked fish that takes food away from native brook trout. I've been checking and monitoring water quality, which is another way that we can give back to our watershed. I feel that teaching the next generation to give back and participate in reciprocity will ensure the health of our watersheds for those next 7 generations. I've also been honored to be part of bringing back the 7th generation to this place so that they once again can paddle the waters. In this picture, here's an elder teaching youth how to fish on our family's land on the Comagon River. And in Pesquiamscut, Larry, that's you, in the river at the Rock Dam, a direct descendant of that sacred fishing place and the site of the massacre in May 19th of 1676. And we also participated in a canoe paddle from Vernon, Vermont. And this was one of the first times that New England Native people were paddling down the Quinnipiac River together, you know, really for the first time in centuries. And it was such a powerful day. There is now an annual Abenaki Fishing Day at the Rock Dam at Pesquiamscut. And it's, again, it's truly just been an honor to be a part of this reclamation, to be feeling the joy in practicing subsistence fishing, the wonder in seeing children explore, hearing laughter, listening to songs, and the telling of stories. All of this is a powerful, beautiful place connection, the Quinnipiac River watershed. So I want to thank you so much, Koyanak Lala Nevigin, for listening. And I now am going to have the absolute honor, because I have only recently gotten to know this incredible person, and I have seen him collecting and distributing medicine for elders and for those in need during this pandemic. Andre is making sure he is working steadily every day in lifting cultural traditions and doing so in prayer. So I am honored to welcome Andre Strong BearHeart Gaines Jr., who is a citizen of the Nipmuc people, and he serves as a cultural steward for his tribe. He is importantly a father, public speaker, traditional dancer, and an activist for Indigenous rights. He's a carpenter by trade and an educator. With over a decade in recovery from drugs and alcohol, Andre is a sponsor and integrated life coach for those in need. Andre's work focuses on bringing traditional knowledge back to Indigenous peoples, and some of this consists on how to flesh and brain tan hides to make items such as drums, buckskin, and blankets. This work is focused on cultural revitalization and preservation, everyday life and traditional values while navigating the colonial systems we live in. He considers family, culture, and traditions to be the three most important aspects within life. And so with that, I will turn this over to Andre. Thank you.
Patakwakawani, Natasawas, Minikisu Mas Mata, Knipium. I want to say thank you, Rhonda, for those words. They do mean a lot to me. You know, I also have my nephew with me here.
Hi, good evening. Natasawas Waono to the past. Take you, Watakosheyu. Hope you're all having a good evening.
Yes. So we come to you today, thankful for the words that are coming to us before as we speak right now. You know, when I was asked to speak, and you know, the highlight of this talk is that we are the land, we are the people, we're still here. It's really simple for me to think about such things because in everyday life, it's something that we juggle. It's something that we struggle with, I should say, living in colonized times and being forced to work into certain areas of my life, depending on how you want to live. But as Rhonda said, I am a carpenter by trade. And so I'm able to sometimes choose the work that I do and sometimes not. So, like I said, unfortunately, sometimes we're put into situations where I'm working in the city and it's just constant struggle because most people in today's day and age don't see what we see, even though we're looking at a city. We see traditional homelands. As Rhonda said, I am Nipmuc from, you know, my family is from Springfield. And, also, I have family on the Cape and in Worcester. And, you know, so these are ancestral homelands. And so it's tough when people come up to you and, you know, they ask you where you're from and act like, you know, we are actually not the people that aren't from here, you know, like we're quote unquote immigrants. And it's just, it's a tough thing to deal with from day to day. So, you know, when I hear this question about we are the land and we are the people, I always take time to spend with people to inform them about who we are, about where we came from, and right here and in our traditional homelands. You know, maybe inform them and where they came from. You know, a lot of people are unaware of even their own roots. You know, and I heard one of my elders tell me too that these people themselves, you know, their spirits and their ancestors are waiting for them to remember their ancestral songs and their ancestral languages. And so, you know, I just kind of put that out there for those who are, you know, struggling to find the path. You know, the red road. It's not easy. It's been about 13 years for me to be on the red road. And you know, I'm very lucky to have wonderful teachers and beautiful community in my life to be able to guide me in certain directions, which I'm very thankful for. And so today we want to come together, and it's a very strange format for us to be in front of a computer screen and be able to share some medicine with you guys. But we want to sing a couple of social songs. Traditionally, these would have been sung sometimes for long periods of times, but most definitely with groups, large groups of people. But I at least have my nephew here who is gonna show some of the dance that goes along with the song that I'm gonna sing, the songs that I'm gonna sing, and I hope that it finds you in a good way in your heart, that you're able to gain some medicine from. Being that we're in this time of the season right now, I'm in Western Mass right now, so I know this morning it was pretty chilly, and it was a real reminder of Nipmuc fall on its way and the harvest. And whenever these seasons change, it really is a great reminder about life, and it gives you a good chance to be able to think about harvest and how things that we need to harvest in our life, whether it's many different aspects of things we need to harvest, but we just want to give thanks to the harvest, and we're getting close to that time. So as my elders and ancestors before me have told me that the men are the life takers and the women are the life givers. And so in this time of harvest, and in this time of prayer, that I'd like to put up, especially since we all can't be in front of each other, I want to sing a Calumet song. And what Miguel is going to do is he's going to dance his body basically into the position of a pipe, Calumet. And the reason being is that the men are the life takers. And so in this time of harvest, we would be taking the lives of many things, whether it be plants, medicine plants, whether it be certain animals, the tucks, or any sort of other animals that would have fed us and prepared us for Pompanay, the winter coming. And so we want to sing this song in a good way right now, and we're gonna go right to it right now. This is the Calumet, and I hope that it's sung in a good way, and that people can receive what they should from it. Ready? Oh, yonder, 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 So thank you. Thank you, Miguel, for dancing that. You know, putting that medicine out. Yeah. So that's a Kayumat, and you know, it's a sacred thing. Like my relatives have told me before in the past, when we take the life of something, and so when we did, we would have smoked our pipe for it, and we would have put the prayer into tobacco into the sky, and so this dance is a representation of that, and yeah, and so we are grateful for these traditional dances and these old ways, you know. Right now, I think we're gonna go into, what do you want to do? It's so tough doing these dances without many people being with each other. But I think that if you can go into, actually, yes, this is something I wanted to speak on real quick. Today's day and age, one thing that we suffer from, which is a big problem for our people, and I'm sure for many others. But I think large results of it stem from systematic colonization in many different ways. And we struggle with drugs and alcohol. Our people struggle in many different ways, and people struggle with other addictions in the same ways as well. And so right now we would have had at least 4 people with these dances. Well, you know, something our tribe has been doing for a little while now has been we've always sang our stomp dance, but recently it's been kind of dedicated to those who are suffering with drugs and alcohol right now, and I personally know many who are, and so we want to sing a stomp dance for you right now. And I know there's only 2 of us. Normally there'd be a balance between men and women in it as well, but in the time of pandemic, we have to sing how we can, you know. So we're gonna sing this stomp dance. I hope you can hear me as I walk this way. We're gonna yell it. So, you know, I want to pray for anybody who is suffering with drugs and alcohol in this time, and those who need help. Please, with over 13 years on this road, I have a lot of connections in which we can help people find the connections that they need to be able to become whole again. I've heard it said before, fortunately, a life can be turned upside right, you know. And so today we just want to sing this song for everybody struggling with drugs and alcohol. And this dance traditionally, though, was to give thanks for all those things that didn't have legs. And so when we're stomping for those things who, whether it be the blades of grass, whether it be the medicine plants, whether it be the snakes or worms, and all those things that can't stomp, in which ways we do. So yes, I just want to say that.
Yo, yo, hey. Yo, hey. Yo, hey. Yo, hey. Yo, hey. Way ha, 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 way ha. Oh yo, 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 oh yo. Way, 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 oh yo, oh yo, oh yo, woo, woo. Yo, 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 yes. Yo, 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 yes. Yo, 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 yes. Yo, yo, yes. Yo, yes. Yo, yes. Woo, woo. Yo, harawera, yo, harawera, yo, harawera, yo, harawera, yo, harawera, Yo hara hera, yo hane. 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 Woo! Woo! Hey ha, yo hane. Well, hane. Hey ha, yo hane. Well, hane. Oh, ha, yo hane. Yo, well, hane. Hey ha, yo hane. Yo, well, hane. Hey ha, yo hane. Yo, well, hane. Oh, oh, yo, yo, well, hane. Yo, well, hane. Woo, woo. Yo, hara, hara. Yo, hara, hara. Yo, hane. Yo, hara, hara. Yo, hane. Yo, hara, hara. Yo, hane. Yo hara hara, yo 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 hane. Woo, woo. Boom, divado, boom, mayaska. Boom, divado, boom, mayaska. Boom, divado, boom, mayaska. Boom, divado, boom, mayaska. Yo, hey, on it. 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 Well, yo, hey, up. Yo, hey, on it. Yo, hey, on it. Yo, hey, on it. Yo, hey, on it. That was a good one.
So I hope you guys like that one. It means a lot to us. I know it means a lot to those, especially who can't dance anymore as well, you know, because some of our ancestors and our relatives, whether they're suffering because, you know, physically they're not able to dance anymore, it's another one that we're happy to share with the people. Like Rhonda said as well in my intro, cultural preservation is a really important thing for me, to be able to show these young ones, whether it's ceremony, whether it's showing them how to take a hide and turning it into something that we can wear, or play, and the actual relationship between that animal, and then how it becomes our food sovereignty, which then turns into our clothing or our strings, and so many other things that we can use from an animal, in which most people in today's day and age, it's completely disregard and throw away. And so it's pretty much at my upfront front lines to continuously to show these young ones, whether it's language or just cultural preservation. And the more us people get together in these ways, hopefully not so electronic for too much longer, the more we can share with each other. Thank you for the stories, for those who spoke before me. Rhonda, thank you. I got to know a little bit more about your family and where you come from. It's a beautiful thing, and I thank you for that. Another person who is so significant to me is my cousin, Larry Spotted Crow Mann, who I think at this time I'm going to introduce. This is a gentleman to me who I would call an elder. And I know that a lot of people would say that an elder doesn't mean just an age, it's your wisdom, your knowledge. And, Larry, to me, has much knowledge, and he's very important to me. We've just recently lost some of our elders in our community, and it would be and it's a sad thing when we do. We do know that our flesh is temporary, but it's also sad when we're still here that we can't share in certain ways with those relatives. And so another relative to me, Larry, I'm very grateful for. And so Larry, man, is a nationally acclaimed author and a citizen of the Nipmuc Nation, the Nipmuc tribe. And he is an award-winning writer, poet, cultural educator, traditional storyteller, tribal drummer, dancer, and motivational speaker. Involved in youth sobriety, cultural and environmental awareness. He has served as a board member of the Nipmuc Cultural Preservation, which is an organization set up to promote the cultural, social, and spiritual needs of the Nipmuc people, as well as an educational resource of Native American studies. Mann also serves as a review committee member at the Native American Poets Project at the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology. Sorry for that. He travels throughout the United States, Canada, and parts of Europe to schools, colleges, powwows, and other organizations sharing the music, culture, and history of Nipmuc people. Thank you for that, cousin. And he has also given lectures at universities throughout the New England on issues ranging from Native American sovereignty to identity. And I really want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. And without further ado, here is Larry Spotted Crow Mann. Thank you.
To the body, Mishnita. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, everybody. And as David Brule said, it'd be a tough act to follow all these acts, so I give you babies. Actually, I would like to start up a song here. Katea's gonna let me. We're gonna do a paddle song. Oh, maybe he doesn't want to. Oh, he's mad. Okay. Bye, Katea. So it's what an honor it's been to be here today. And I just would like to say, Wunashana Tumumanatu, Tabati, Watuchi Kendisen, Okumis, Tabati Uchi Sapausu, Wasakatia Huanak, Notas Ninuamanantiong, King Nuta Yu Pantaminok, and the male Ninuama Quantum Kicha, Ka Mata Wananta, Ka Nagutie, Kokuta Minua, Menatu, Wasakatia Huna, Womanetio, ka noso ko muso amoke ninaho kankantu chokesuchi. Miayo. I greet you all in the words of my Algonquin language, the language of this land, the language of my people. And as I said, it's an honor to be with all you here today. It's such a pleasure to hear the music of Mixashawn, this brilliant playing as I've enjoyed for many decades now. Rhonda really laid out everything, probably many of the things I was gonna say. Really no more for me to say today, basically. It's just so brilliant and beautiful, just pretty much underscored that. My younger cousin here, Andre Strong BearHeart and Miguel, real privileged to hear that music. And I was hoping to have my little one join me in a paddle song, but he just woke up from a nap and a little restless. So I guess I'm gonna do a solo here. I'm gonna start off with a song. Yahweh, 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 Hayana, Hayana, Hayana. Hayana, 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 Hayana. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Kitiyam nuwichi nipi Yahweh, nipi kitiyam nuwichi nenawan. Chemoche munake, chemoche munake, chemoche munake, Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Kitiyam nuwichi nipi Yahweh, nipi kitiyam nuwichi nenawan. Chemoche munake, chemoche munake, chemoche munake, Yahweh, Yah. With the bottom. Thank you. Thank you. Now he's ready to come and sing with me. Hey, you missed it. Next time. All right. So, again, it's wonderful to be with all you here today. As we talked about here today, the title of this presentation is "We Are a Story and We Are the Land." And so I want to ask everybody, as my partner here closes the door and the baby runs away, I want to ask everybody here today, when we talk about we are the story, we are the land, what is the story that we are telling each other? What story do we tell to the world? And what story do we tell to ourselves? Because we have a story out there and we have an inner story. And so we have that part. Then we also have a larger narrative of the story of our country, right? So what's the story America tells itself? Says it's a place of exceptionalism, promised lands, discovery, freedom for all, God's chosen people. And so that is a stark contrast to the story that indigenous people and other people of color have grown up with. The story is more like a history of enslavement, genocide, stolen lands, Jim Crow laws, segregations, boarding schools, children taken at our border, police brutality. And so these are far apart of the story that we're telling ourselves in two totally different narratives under one country. And so these stories that are not really consistent with what many of our people have grown up with have caused deleterious effects on who we are. Myself, growing up in Massachusetts here, going through the school system, had very difficult effects on me, and I talk about it many times in books and articles and so on. And so when we think about the issues that trouble Native people today, it all stems back to the stories that we tell ourselves. Growing up in the classroom, Native person accomplishing anything. We were told my tribe was extinct. I was told that, you don't really have a place in this society. And so if I'm internalizing the idea that I'm merely benefiting, I'm a hapless, I'm benefiting by white proximity, and I'm just kind of benefiting from all this that are around me, then I internalize the idea that I really have nothing to contribute. And as Rhonda pointed out, some of the deleterious effects we see in Indian communities with suicide, the disproportionate amount of health disparities,
And many of the issues that we continue to face are all go back to the story that we tell ourselves. Addiction, and so we need to tell ourselves another story. These are all certainly uncomfortable truths, uncomfortable things to talk about when we think about race and identity and the terrible history of America. And a lot of us just want to block that out. We don't want to talk about it. It's like, no, we're exceptional. We're perfect. But when you open up your eyes and look around you and see the calamity before you, can see that the foundations of this country was built on a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of pain and suffering that is yet to be talked about. And so when we tell people get over it or and these kind of things, like we don't want to talk about it, it just continues to build and build and build until we have a lot of the situations that we're dealing with today. Me as a traditional storyteller, stories are about healing, about telling another story. And the story of this land has been summarily ripped away from indigenous people. And we are now in the process of trying to turn that around. And we find that, I mean, even when you look into science and different elements of the programs, that we know that the story that we can tell ourselves can fundamentally change how we behave, how we look at the world. Because I believe that first you need a reason to want to do better. You need a reason to want to change. And that starts with telling yourself a new story. So I'm going to read a story from my book, Drumming and Dreaming, as you see the background I have there. And we're going to have some time to talk about a little bit and what this story really means as it changes the narrative. Mateo, where are you? Still looking for my little boy. He's gone. And I think this story I'm going to share here from the book, The Story of the Three Sisters. There are many versions of this story, and this is a shorter version I'm going to share here from the book due to time. This is the story of the three sisters. Long ago, it was this way. There were three sisters, each one very beautiful, but the girls were very different from each other in every way you could imagine. One was very tall, slender, and had long, yellow, smooth hair. The other sister was a little shorter. She had long, curly, and shiny brown hair. The third sister was shorter than the other two. Her hair was radiant black, wavy, but also very long. But even though they loved each other dearly, these differences brought about arguments among them all the time. The endless bickering led them to not want to spend much time with each other. Each sister kept to herself unless it was to disagree about something. The mother was very upset seeing her daughters bickering about like that. She urged them to get along and share with one another. The girls refused. So the mother thought for a long time, what am I to do? A few days had passed, and the three sisters were out in the garden doing what they do, arguing and going at it amongst themselves, fighting, yelling. And they were going at it pretty good, shouting, pointing, and shaking their hands in the air at each other. The mother asked them to stop. Stop at once, she cried out. She asked the three sisters to sit down in the garden beside each other. But the girls were very stubborn. Just as one sister would sit down, the other one would get up and leave. Then, when the other one would come back and sit down, the other sister would walk away. Back and forth they went, not wanting to sit together, not wanting to sit as one. The mother grew very tired of this. Finally, she got them all to sit down in the garden. Mom said, I want you girls to listen. You three sisters are all very special and unique, but you are also part of me. Each one of you, you need to see the beauty not only in yourself, but each other. Girls frowned and mumbled and cut their eyes at each other as they fidgeted about. The mother said, I want you to sit here until you make peace. Sit here until you resolve your differences. Then the mother took each girl's hair and held it in her hands. She gently brought all the girls' hair together. The yellow, brown, the black hair was twisted together in one beautiful long braid. She told them, stay here until you have resolved this quarrel. Once you have come to an accord, unloosen the braid. When I see you have undone the braid, I will know you have made peace. The girls sat for a very long time. The mother returned often to check on them. She noticed the braid had not been undone. As the girls sat in the garden, the braid began to take root into the garden and grow right into the ground. When the mother returned this time, corn, beans, and squash grew in the spot where her daughters were. Mother was sad that her daughters were gone, but then the plants began to speak to her and said, "Do not despair, mother. We have to come together in a way that honors our differences, as you had asked us. And we will always be with you. And what we have, we will share with many generations to come. We shall teach that even with our great differences among us, we can come together and share with each other. And when we share with one another, a new strength is born." Sister Corn provided a structure for her sister Beans to climb, eliminating the need for poles. Sister Beans provided nutrients to Mother Earth that helped her sister grow healthy and strong. And Sister Squash spread out along the ground, blocking the sunlight to prevent the weeds from growing on her sisters. Sister Squash also grew wide leaves to help moisture the soil and grew prickly hairs on her vines to deter pests. The three sisters teach us that by sharing with one another, we not only can heal from within, but also become stronger with unity. Botany. I wanted to share that story specifically because it really underscores so much about some of the things I was talking about earlier in terms of going to school and not hearing any Native American heroes or scientists or doctors and so on, that we didn't have that. And what this story does is completely turns that narrative on its head in so many facets. For example, when we think about what that means, the three sisters, the corn, beans, and squash growing together. When we think agriculture, because this was an agricultural marvel that Western science is now beginning to understand in terms of monoculture, which we grow these large fields of all this one crop and insects come in and totally destroy it, as opposed to polyculture, which was an indigenous practice that Europeans were not aware of, where you grow these plants together. And by doing so, you provide all the different things that the soil needs, and you protect each plant in the way that they did that. And on a scientific level, you have these carbohydrates and amino acids all working together to provide this just really great diet. And then taking it a step further, we're talking about empowering women. You have these three sisters, the metaphor where women come in to essentially save communities, right? And also the feminizing of the planet and really understanding that how we are all part of all these different things. So we didn't have the privilege of hearing these stories. They were supplanted by boarding schools, and the constellations became Greek. The land and water turned into English, right? And so these stories were gone, taken away. And what we're left with is drugs, alcohol, despair, suicide. Between 2014 and 2016, we lost 24 Native people because of suicide and overdose here in Massachusetts, a number that's not talked about. And so this is all part of that narrative, all part of that problem that we're trying to overturn now through this work. And so it's a real honor to be a part of this, you know, and we just hear this one story, you know, and I was talking to somebody else recently too about Kinkantu, the spirit that was shared with me through my grandfather at the naming ceremony. And, you know, crows are considered the thieves of corn and all around pests. And, you know, and I to really cross understandings with people, you know, not from this far out native idea, I take them to a place of science where they can look at a zoologist and they can explain to them how the crow is probably one of the most intelligent creatures that ever lived. And so they begin to start seeing this animal in a different way, you know, and so much like indigenous people, when we see the earth, we're connected to it. And so as I said, the crow, the three sisters, these are all ways to bring the land into the people. We are the land, we are the story. And this is what that means. You know, when we don't see ourselves in the land, these are the calamities that happen. They are not, as we say, abstract notions, they are tangible. This river where I live here, here in the heart of Nipmuc land, Webster, as we say, Webster, you know, this lake here, these sacred places, the mountain, Mount Wachusett, Kikamowadachug, different places, Quabog, we can go to these places that are in the stories. But if we don't have the stories to go that match these places, then we feel lost. And this is what we've been suffering here as a community through time since the arrival. So it's been a real privilege to be a part of that. And as my cousin Andre pointed out, I've been involved with so many different facets. It's been over a 30-year journey sharing the culture and traditions, and I like to say I remain teachable. And as much as we know about our culture and different things that we've learned, there's still so much we don't know. And it's really at the same time fascinating, at the same time heartbreaking, that the things that we may never find out. But some of the fundamental principles have remained, and they stay within us. As I shared in one of my books, I was talking in terms of we as the descendants, we have the inherent authority to continue on in this work and share that in a way that is consistent with what our ancestors would want us to do. And I didn't know Rhonda was going to have that picture of me on the river there. That was a very a powerful moment for me to be there when I was on the river there, and thinking about, I was reflecting on that massacre. My ancestors were there on that fateful night, and all the different things that happened here that are never talked about. And everywhere we go, we're telling the mainstream society there's a wealth of information here that could be beneficial to not only the indigenous communities but to the world. And stop telling the story where well, the native people, they help the pilgrims, and it's just so absurd when you think about all the major things that are going on. I mean, we even think about the Industrial Revolution, and what was that about? How did that function? You needed petroleum, rubber, right, and steel. Well, two of those were started by indigenous people, but nobody talks about that. We're not told that. And the sneakers came about through indigenous people. I mean, it goes on and on. The foods that we eat today, and again, the idea of the cosmology and the agricultural techniques that have been practiced for thousands of years are now coming to the light of indigenous epistemology, so that we can better live on this planet. And we're going to open up for a Q&A in a moment, but I just really wanted to touch on, in this time of COVID, and I think Andre pointed out as well, we've lost some relatives in our Nipmuc community, and other people that have shared in this space with us, and so it's been a very hard time. And as you see, and as Andre pointed out as well, we're all getting accustomed to this Zoom, and I love to present in person, and so I read from the book to keep me pinned down to my seat, because I'm a very physical storyteller, as my ancestors taught me, being that our stories and our writing is verb oriented as opposed to English, which is noun oriented. So it's a very physical thing when we share our stories. But it's always very funny, because you're really home and you got the kids coming in and out, and Browna's got the cat and so on. So it's really fun though, and as everybody kind of makes this adjustment. But it's certainly been hard. And just before I turn it over to the Q&A, I just want to thank Nolumbeka for having us here and providing this platform for us to share. And I want to just send out my prayers to everybody in this time, and wish you well, whatever you're going through right now. And remember, keep that drum close to you. And so with that, I'll close. Tabatni.
Okay, it looks like we have a question. How can I say thank you to all the presenters? Your words and amazing spirit and songs and dances brought water out through my eyes and nose. What kind of support does your community welcome now from non-native allies? Oh my goodness. There's a lot of support right now that we're looking for. MassIndigenousAgenda.org is a place to go to help with our legislature. I don't know if I can say that, but MassIndigenousAgenda.org is a great place to go right now. Thank you.
Would you like people to raise their hand to ask a question or use the Q&A?
Either one's fine for me.
Okay. Just for the audience, there should be a little hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you press that, I see someone found it. I will unmute you so you can ask your question of the panelists. Rima, yep, you should be able to go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, have probably Larry Spotted Crow particularly, have you found that it's important to reclaim as much of your language as you can in order to go deeper into the culture as not only as it was, but as it can continue?
Yes, absolutely. As my cousin, my late cousin Tall Pine would say, the language is the ecology of the land. And so, for example, as you see this beautiful illustration behind me by my brother Robert Peters from the Mashpee Wampanoag, you see that beautiful white pine there. And so in English, you would say white pine, but in our language, it would be interpreted as the being that gives us life and shelter and comfort and warmth and as a brother. So the language really has a significant different narrative when we speak in our language. As I was mentioning earlier, native language is all about being, right? So it's a verb-oriented language as opposed to English, noun-oriented. So in English, for example, you would say, it is raining. But in native language, you would just say raining because it's an act of being, of presence.
Jack, you should be able to ask your question.
I was actually wondering what the current status was for the sovereignty of the Mashpee Wampanoag. There was a court case recently.
Since none of them are on the call here, I would direct that to them or go to their website of the tribe. I think that would be the best suggestion on that.
Okay, there's a question in the Q&A, if someone can read that.
I think we're good with our questions in the Q&A. I think we've answered them so far.
Okay. Peter, you should be able to ask your question then.
Hi, Rhonda. You know who I am. And just want to say hi to Larry and deep appreciation to Andre and Miguel for those very moving songs and dances. It's so moving to see you, people in our area, actually doing these traditional practices and speaking in your own language. Haven't had a chance to have that opportunity before. I had a chance recently to see the Dawnlands movie, so I was gut-wrenched by the effects of having people talking about having their culture taken away. I guess I'm following on a previous question. A couple of you said you were raised in Massachusetts, and I assume Miguel is maybe going to school in Springfield. Are people more able today, young people, to maybe wear their hair long or maybe acknowledge their indigenous identity in the schools, or is it still very, very hard to, in a sense, be open with your friends? I don't know if Miguel's on. He could even answer it himself if he wanted. If it's beginning to be a little more possible, and what can we do to make it more possible for the Native kids in our schools to be able to be claiming their heritage and proud in it, as you are, Miguel, obviously?
I'm honored to have be Native American, so I'm proud to show my hair long, and a lot of students, they're not open about their culture. Well, a lot of my friends, I tell them like, you should be very into it, but like nowadays it's hard for kids to like be more open because they're afraid of what other people think. So, I mean, I wouldn't know how other people, but I guess, just to be more open minded. I tell a lot of people in my school and stuff like that.
Yeah, if I could, I think it all starts at home first with who's leading the family and to help them feel the way that they should, with their own identity. But I think to answer your question, when it comes to scholastically, like what people can do in school, Rhonda, or I'm sure Larry can definitely speak on some of the information and criteria that is being pushed into the schools so that some of these um, ways, I mean, kids will be kids in general, but I think that I think it's important to start at home to make sure people feel good with who they are first, and then after that, there's information like that can be pushed into the schools through criteria, which I know is, which Larry might want to speak on, or
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So, and this is kind of and I want to kind of like also align this with a lot of our young indigenous people out there as well, and give them some inspiration and kind of focus it around that. So when I was going to school, I grew up in the late 70s and 80s, going to grade school and middle school and all that, and it's probably the worst time of my life because there was absolutely nothing. The books were probably from the late 1900s that we were looking at. Again, Indians were extinct, and and I went from having my hair pulled by teachers, and it was a really horrible time. My oldest brother was nicknamed Injun Joe. And then you go back to my mother's generation. She was born in a time where interracial marriage was still illegal in many states. And then going back to her great-great-grandparents, we come from two generations where kids were taken and put in these boarding schools and went through horrendous things where some of them even disappeared. So kind of going forward, seeing what's going on today, having platforms and speaking. I've been in education for many years now and have students from different parts of the world. And sometimes I'm in awe when I see all the different cultures and ethnicities in the class, because this is not something that's happened in America before. And I know we use the term conciliation, but there's reconciliation, but there's never been anything really to reconcile, because we come from a history of genocide, enslavement, Jim Crow laws, Civil Rights Act, and we're kind of progressing forward, right? So we cannot look back at a time where it was better for our people since the landing of the Mayflower. And so when I think about the young people today, our indigenous people out there, you are definitely standing on the shoulders of giants and thinking about where we come from, and the platforms that are available now were not available to my generation and my mom's. And so we have to really take advantage of that. I have, as you saw, my little baby, but I also have grown boys as well. And what I did when they were coming up, because of what I've learned through the years, is I went to every classroom and told them why those boys have long hair. I came with the drum and I did cultural programs. And so every teacher that they ever had the benefit of knowing that. But not every teacher had that. And so that's why it's very important for us to get out there and share this information. And going back to that question about what can allies do, it's learn this history. And as my other little cousin Brittany talks about, we don't want to always have to be responsible for teaching this. Kind of go out there and do this research and learn more about it, because we only usually have a brief time to touch on these dynamic topics of indigeneity. So it's very important that we go and do our own research and find out what's between the lines and what was hidden from us. Thank you.
I see that there is a question from Pam Kelly. The Nolumbeka Project has had a program in Franklin County schools on protections for our pollinators like bumblebees. It is so critical right now also because the colonization has not stopped, and the challenge we are also facing is loss of ecosystem. The key species to helping keep the seeds alive are the pollinators. Are pollinators part of the indigenous culture of the Nipmuc? Larry, can you answer that?
Are pollinators?
Yes.
traditionally, all of these different aspects were, so to answer that question, I'll answer it this way. My great grandmother, for lack of a better term, was a medicine woman and herbalist, and knew many medicines and many traditions, and carried out such as that. And when I would ask my grandfather about her, I said, well, what kind of garden did she have? He said she didn't have a garden. It was just the woods behind the house, and she knew where to go and everything. So when I think about that question, I think about in terms of how our ancestors traditionally took care of all these things and how they took care of us, because it was an interrelationship. It was a relationship back and forth. However, we currently do not have a program, but I have been approached about getting involved, because protecting the bees are something I really want to be able to do, in terms of not letting them disappear, and realizing how they are responsible for taking care of at least 80% of our foods that we eat. Without them, we can't eat. So again, we talk about that interrelationship that we need to take care of one another.
Okay, Louise, you should be able to ask your question.
Hello there. Thanks so much to all of you for this incredible presentation. Really enjoying all the content. Thank you. So there's a couple of questions here. My one is, I was very interested to learn about the fact that all of these indigenous folks who came up with brilliant discoveries, scientific discoveries, remain unrecognized. And I'd be curious to know how we can, how do we correctly bring these names back into the foreground? Are there resources we can look at to tell a story?
Okay, I'll jump in again. I've been doing everything I can with every breath I have for over 30 years to say names like Mudawamp and indigenous people's names and different discoveries and different things that they are responsible for that never gets talked about. I say the Revolutionary War, I say the Civil War, and I talk about how many of my direct ancestors were involved with that. I say how the largest racial population who joins and serves this country are people of Native American ancestry, which is not talked about. Again, I mentioned earlier about the Industrial Revolution, how Native people are responsible for that. But it just can't be just me, right? So we need, again, this is a call to like the younger generation to continue to share this information, and our allies and accomplices to get this information out there. And again, I'll just say real quick, it doesn't, when we start talking about these truths, it doesn't fit well with the American narrative of exceptionalism, because we have to talk about the genocide. We have to talk about the gut-wrenching experience of the boarding school survivors. We have to talk about the removal. We have to talk about Deer Island, where many of my ancestors were taken out there and starved and frozen to death. We have to talk about how the wars, the massacres, and so the disease and the names that should not be named after place, where these people who are like on par with some of the other destroyers around the world in through time. So, and these things are very uncomfortable to a lot of people, because it challenges their way of thinking. It challenges their narrative. I mean, kind of segueing into what we know about mascots. People will say, well, I had this mascot for 100 years. I don't want to change. And so it becomes a very uncomfortable idea to have to move beyond our thinking and do more critical research on what I've been believing. And it's essentially becomes like a religion. And but our indigenous people, we know these things not to be true, because we had the shared and lived experience of knowing America is not exceptional. When my ancestors were in chains and enslaved and beaten and robbed and injured for just being who they are. So we know these aren't true.
That's a good answer. Thank you. I'm still unmuted. I do have one more question. My friend Pam here would like to present it.
So I heard a child once ask, when people were coming from Europe to try to settle here in North America, that the child, who was maybe 8 years old or so, just couldn't understand why the people coming to try to be here on this land, why they thought they were different than the people who were here. And when we think of how do we talk to our children about the history and why people think everyone was so different, it's just, I think it's the power of the truth of what happened. but it's also thinking of ways that we can speak to our children about what happened, why people were so afraid, why they had so much, hate or negative emotion or so much violence. So I think it's just diving deeper into culturally, like trying to understand from the child perspective through the eyes of a child. It's kind of a comment, kind of a question.
How do we frame the answer?
Right.
I was waiting for Ron to speak, but I'll just say, I've been speaking at schools, and I talk to many preschoolers sometimes in kindergartens, and I talk to them, and of course I try to frame the narrative in terms of the level of their comprehension and in a way that it's not going to like overwhelm them. And so I talk about how there were people who were not nice to each other because of the way they looked, and kids really grasp that and they understand that. And we have to remember, racism is taught. You're not born with it. And this is not going to be an easy conversation with America, and we see that even when we think about in terms of PTSD, there's certain things that are triggered, and so whenever we talk about race, who are the people that get triggered by it? It's usually white people, right? They don't want to talk about it because it's opening up something that they want to be in denial about for many reasons. And I can't get into that because we can't get inside people's heads. But until we come to terms with that, we're going to continue to have the issues that we have in America. America has never apologized publicly to indigenous people. During the Obama administration, on the Department of Defense, I forget what page, maybe like in 30 or 40th page, there's a really, obscure apology. And at the end of that apology, it's a disclaimer saying, by this apology, we're not going to grant any land and so on. It was really weird. So that's as close as they ever came. But to date, nobody of Congress, no president, nobody publicly has said we are sorry for what we did to the indigenous people. But we can get to a better place. But it starts with understanding. It starts with opening up and just like letting people be free to speak, as we talked about before, that reconcile, letting people share those stories of those horrifying stories of being removed in the boarding schools. You have to let them open up and talk about it, and that space needs to be created. And so, and we have to be willing to listen to that and go through the pain. It's going to be painful. People are going to be uncomfortable. But we will, on the other side of that, be in a better place as a country.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Alexis, you should be able to ask yours.
Hi, thank you. Larry actually just spoke to a lot of what I was going to ask, but I'm just going to ask my question anyway, which is about the tough work and the tough conversations. I just worked to get rid of our town's, our school system's racist mascot, and fine, they agreed to do that. But now the real work of broad community education begins. Rhonda mentioned truth and reconciliation. And I'm wondering, Rhonda, what can small towns, which are only just now starting to even contemplate the concept of decolonization, do to begin a process of real truth and reconciliation? And I was going to ask Larry, how can such towns, which may have been holding very tightly to these colonial narratives, begin the work of recreating narratives, telling new stories? And I know Larry just spoke about how hard that's going to be, but I guess I was wondering just a little bit about the nuts and bolts of if anyone had ideas about how those conversations really do take place.
Hi, thank you for your question. Hopefully you can hear me. I know that my internet's starting to go down. I believe it's a good idea for these communities to reach out to the tribes that are in the area and create lasting reciprocal relationships. Not just token relationships, but lasting and reciprocal relationships. Have communications. Get to know the Native people of your area. Get to know, their traditions, their cultures, their history, and give them voice. in having these relationships and having conversations and in a way that fosters reciprocity, the answers about representation will become obvious. So that's the very first step. It's not easy to have a relationship when there still is, like, let's say a town is still holding on to the last vestiges of their mascot tree. That's going to be really difficult. Not a lot of Native people are going to want to come in and educate when it's still there. But when the change has happened, it's going to be a lot easier. And don't give up. Reach out to your Native community that's local. Have these conversations. Have them come in and, you know, talk, educate, hear their side of history. That's probably the first and foremost step of reconciliation that I can think of. We do need to have truth and reconciliation, but that's on a government or a state level. Thank you.
Okay, and the last question, let's try and keep it short, is Gia. You should be able to ask your question.
Thank you. I want to say thank you for an hour, but I promise I won't. I just want to recognize the young man whose name that I did not register. Thank you for dancing for us. My question is, for anyone who wants to answer it, how do you feel about non-native allies learning your language? Is that something that you welcome? And do you welcome us speaking it, or just learning it to understand you in your language?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. So this is going to vary from tribe to tribe and community to community. So there's no one answer. Just as Rhonda was pointing out, every indigenous community is unique and has its own counsel and ideas about how they inform those ideas. The way it was taught to me as Nipmuc from my cousin Talpine is that we want everybody, especially people living in Nipmuc land, to learn these words, to speak our language. It's open to everybody. Again, other communities may not feel that way, but our community, certainly we want everybody, we love everybody to speak Nipmuc, because we believe what that does is you can have that relationship with the land, with that language. In English, you can't have that relationship with the water, the nipi, the trees, because they don't speak the same language. This land speaks Algonquin, and the trees remember that language because it's been here for so long, thousands of years we're talking. Many times we think of history of America, 500 years. No, it's thousands and thousands of years that we're talking about history here. And so the language speaks Algonquin here in this Nipmuc land. So we believe that if people, allies and accomplices can learn that language, they begin understanding that relationship and understanding that land. The same concept Massasoit and other people had when we welcome the people here, that if they come here in a good way, we could all work together in that reciprocity. And it still holds true. Unfortunately, the exploitation and all the horrible things that happen does not take that away of the idea of unity. It's still there, it still exists. And there's a story behind that. I don't have the time to share it, but there's a beautiful story that goes with that. And it essentially talks about just because other people are doing things wrong doesn't mean you have to too as well. Just be who you are.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn it back over to David to close us out.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We've come to the end of a long, wonderful program. I have to thank all of the people who participated in all the questions that came in, but definitely a big thank you to Rhonda and Larry, Andre, Miguel, and Mixashawn. In closing, we just want to say people have asked how to support some of the indigenous groups in the Valley. I'd say get in touch with the Okateo Council that Rhonda and Larry have just breathed major life into. Keep in mind the Nolumbeka Project, we play the role of a go-between as best we can, and we offer a lot of examples. And of course, get in touch with your Congress people, the legislature, the people who are dealing with changing the state seal, the state flag, and all of the bills referring to the bill referring to mascots. So get active locally. That's what I could suggest. And we want to thank you all for attending. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and goodbye all. Kwene.